Okay, we will call this meeting of the Grand Marais Planning Commission to order. It is 5:31. With us today, we have David Kelly, and we have Ben Peters, and Kelly Swearingen, and myself, Mike Herring. And we have an agenda before us. And I would take a motion to approve.
Motion to approve the agenda.
Thank you, Ben. Motion, is there a second?
We do not have minutes here to approve, so do we need to amend the agenda?
Oh, I see that. Yeah, I guess, let's do that. So amend that agenda, you bringing that forward,
I will.
make the amendment?
Just that we remove the approved minutes and they can be at next month's meeting.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, and then we'll need a motion for that. Ben, would you like to make that, or David, would you like to make that motion?
Sure.
Okay, great. So we've got a motion, a second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Great. So today, we are going all the way down to D, to our new business. We have a zoning request. You all have read it through. I would ask that Howard, you can come forward. Or you're heavy, I mean, you know, however you wanna, we can do it, but I think it makes sense. And, so turn on your microphone.
Turn on my microphone.
Yeah, if you
Just
Press
press
the
the
button.
rectangle.
just tap it.
Pass.
There you
There you
go. Thank you, and introduce yourself.
Okay, I'm Tim Kennedy, and I'm here assisting with the request for the rezoning from the Great Expectations Foundation. This is my understanding, prior to the actual public hearing on this, it's more to bring to the attention of the Planning Commission kind of the dilemma of the situation. The Great Expectations Foundation expanded the school last year, created additional classroom space, which is actually not needed right now. And they wish to, offer it available to compatible type uses, office uses that may benefit from that kind of space. Unfortunately, the properties in the R1 zone district and office uses are not allowed as a permitted or conditional use in that district. But the surrounding properties around that area are in the mixed use district, which does allow offices, but doesn't allow schools. So kind of a strange situation that one of the districts that the school is in allows the school, but it doesn't allow the offices, but the mixed use district doesn't allow the schools, but it does allow the offices. So we're looking for kind of a feeling on from the Planning Commission on two different things. One is the potential to rezone the property to mixed use districts and to change then the allowable uses in the mixed use district to allow schools, and I think you'll see the language, schools including daycare facilities. And I think the language in the R1 district is schools and nurseries. Now, I was hoping to help maybe clarify what nurseries might be, because there's no definition for nurseries, and there's no definition for schools either in the ordinance. But
Well, there is. I mean, we have definitions for schools, so.
don't think there was a definition for schools in at least the ordinance that I looked at, but maybe
Yeah,
there
and then
is.
it points you, well, when you look for the definition of schools, I mean, it doesn't really have all that much, but it does point you to the state's description. And
Okay.
So,
Which-
but it's essentially a school, and you all know, is
Yes.
what it is.
Well, what does R1 say? Public elementary or high schools or private schools with an equivalent curriculum. I don't think we need a definition beyond those words to understand
Yeah,
what,
no, for sure.
right?
I mean,
And clearly,
Well-
Great Expectations meets those requirements.
And we'd like to have daycare as well.
And then the next line says, churches, parish homes, convents, children's nurseries, and schools. And again, we could add a definition for children's nurseries, but I think because it says children's nurseries, it's plain language and understood to mean a daycare.
Yeah, and I would just suggest that the language that you use in the mixed-use district just says schools and daycare facilities, but, you know, you can choose how you want to characterize that language.
All right.
So that's why we're here tonight, is to just ask for the support of the planning commission to move this forward, to bring it to a public hearing and, you know, involve, you know, the public in that process.
Now, they've already offered their application for rezoning of the property, which is to amend the map to say this piece that is now zoned residential, they would like it to be zoned HMU highway mixed use. Of course, that doesn't make any sense to actually do the rezoning unless we change the list of what's allowed in highway mixed use to include schools. Otherwise, we'd be creating a nonconformity, and it just doesn't make any sense.
Right.
Which is why we're doing this in 2 meetings rather than 1, because if we're tonight having a public hearing about the map amendment, but we hadn't even considered whether we were interested in the language change, then cart before the horse. So this isn't a question of you having to make a decision about either of them in a permanent way tonight, but it's a question of if the language change seems like something you're willing to consider, we'll write the ordinance, and then at your next meeting, we'll have a public hearing, and we'll talk about the map amendment. And then both of them can go to the council together right after that. An ordinance that changes the language in the code and also that amends the map.
The question I would have is, how does rezoning this particular property affect adjoining properties, right, as far as setbacks, as far as uses, right?
We had that issue before, I remember, on the opposite side of the street.
Yeah, and it's interesting, the opposite side of the street, the growth property that they developed residentially, we changed that zoning from highway mixed use to residential to allow for the residential development that they're doing. And so there's a little extension of the residential zoning on the east side of the Gunflint Trail.
Right.
It probably makes sense to contact them and consider including them in the map amendment.
That was before highway mixed use.
Because highway mixed use now allows residential, multifamily residential uses, which is what they did. And so the issue that was on that side was if you have a residential zone, it creates a 50-foot setback from commercial properties.
And that would have affected.
So the changing from residential back to commercial actually makes it easier for people to develop their property rather than adding that 50-foot buffer. It would take it away from the adjoining properties. But it would create on their property a 50-foot setback from the neighbor's residential property, which isn't a problem because their neighbor's residential property is all across a 66-foot public right-of-way. So it wouldn't create any new issues, and it would actually make it easier for adjoining properties to develop by switching this to the commercial.
Okay.
Just to put an additional burden on them that they will have no problem.
Say that again, so I'm thinking the property to the west on Fifth Avenue West.
Yep, so the property to the west is residentially zoned,
Yep,
is currently being used as a single-family residence.
yep,
They don't have any setbacks from the neighboring property that depend on what's going on there. Because the residential zone just says you need to be 25 feet from the front and back and 8 feet from the sides.
okay,
The residential property right now that the school's on, so they're under those same requirements. If they become a commercially zoned property, then commercial uses on their property will have a 50-foot setback from the neighbors. So they won't be able to develop anything as close as 50 feet to the neighbor's existing residential property. But there's a 66-foot right-of-way in between those two properties, and so there isn't any issue at all because the 50-foot setback is completely taken up by the street right-of-way.
And that street right-of-way also exists on the south side of the property between the Lashinsky property and the Great Expectations property too, so
And
there's no road or.
But they're already zoned commercial.
yeah.
Right.
So when Great Expectations went in, they had to gotten some sort of amendment here than to put into residential, the school?
They were part of a zone that was R2 residential.
Uh-huh.
And so they actually had larger setbacks than typical residential property.
Okay.
That zone's since been dispensed with and changed
Okay.
all of it over to R1 zoning.
Okay,
Even if they had been developed in the commercial zone when they were new, the school itself wouldn't have triggered the requirement of the 50-foot setback because it's only for commercial uses. We wouldn't consider a public school a commercial use. We would consider what they're proposing now a commercial use.
right.
And that's probably more like 200 feet from the neighbor's property, so not an issue.
Well, I would be interested in going back to the language and looking at what we would mean by moving schools into the mixed use, highway mixed use. I think, when I'm looking at this, that it doesn't make sense for schools to live there. If we look at our intention for that district, you know, it's all about cars and it's all about, you know, industrial uses and what's all about, you know, lodging and that kind of thing. But it doesn't talk, nothing in here speaks to children at all, or families. But if you look at the R1, it very clearly does. And there's a lot, you know, clearly the R1 is the intended place for schools. So I feel like very strongly that that is where the schools belong, and they do not belong in the mixed use. There's nothing, when you read through these, I mean, automobile dealers, service stations, restaurants, truck and machinery sales, I mean, all that. None of that speaks to me and says like, oh, and schools.
I think so many of these things, when you, at least when I read them, I feel like they get written long after things have happened, right? Things are already in a spot, and then we kind of go, oh, here's the box that they fit in. And I think our job is to figure out, as things develop, what boxes do we want to put things in and where do they make sense? We already have a school and a building in a place. We can't go say, well, now Great Expectations, you're gonna have to go and pick this up and you're gonna have to move it over here.
And they don't have to.
No, I get that.
We're in R1, that's where they should be.
So is there, if not HMU, and I'm not saying I disagree, I'm trying to
Yeah,
figure
let's
all
go.
this out, right? If not the HMU, is there another one that it fits with, that we look at? And again, I'm not willing to say tonight, here's what I think and this is the motion, because if we put it before openings for people to come in and talk to us, I want to hear what the public has to say too.
Sure.
Because there's people out there that know more and are smarter than me.
I don't know any of it.
I'll give you a list.
Okay.
But if it doesn't fit in this and we don't like it as a planning commission in this necessarily, is there another spot that it might fit in better? Or where do we as the planning commission want to put things? And can we think ahead what other development, what things are gonna happen?
Well,
You know, could we, hospital, clinic, nursing home? I mean, we're always looking at, do we keep the nursing home, do we cut it? Then what do we do with that part of the building if it goes away? Or are we gonna expand, are we gonna shrink, what happens? Same thing, schools start to grow, we have these great ideas, but all of this happens and think, how do we plan for the future?
right.
That's where I'm coming from, is if it's not here, and maybe it is here, but if it isn't, is there anything else? Because I was looking at the map myself, going, all right, what are these? SC, okay, well, that's community service. Well, how come, well, there wasn't property to buy, so Great Expectations didn't go there, but it certainly would fit there, but we can't just pick it up tomorrow and move it. So does that corner need to be designated that because this is what we have now? Would it fit in a community service versus an HMU? I don't know.
I like the way you're thinking about it. The complication is that zoning map has to be somewhat contiguous logically. You can't pick one parcel and say, this is what we want this parcel to be zoned, but it's not related to anything that's next to it. And so where you think, yes, the school fits really nice into the SC zone, this property is not adjacent to the SC zone, there's other uses in between the SC zone. If we were to just rezone this property SC, I don't think it would be proper or legal.
So everything around it is a CI. Why would we not want to go with commercial industrial?
Yeah, that's the old name for HMU is CI. So that's where you look at it, there's really three choices that make sense on the map without making really significant changes to the map. R1, which it currently is, and many of the neighboring properties are also R1 and were developed residentially. Highway mixed use, which they have neighboring properties that are, and it would be appropriate to think about on the Gunflint Trail, that's like highway mixed use type zone. Or BDA, which is the property across the street, although that link seems a little more tenuous to me, and it doesn't actually help any of the issues that they brought in front of you anyway. So then it's more of a question of R1 or mixed use. And before we even talk about the map, we have to deal with the question of, is one of those zones appropriate for both schools and office spaces?
Well,
Because that's really what they want to do, is have
Right.
schools and office spaces in the same place. And we don't have any zones where that's possible right now. And those are the only two that we can really feasibly look at for their piece of property without making significant changes. So maybe we don't like that idea at all, or maybe we would be open to it, but it doesn't fit with these two, or maybe one of these two it does fit with.
well, it's in the R1,
Yeah,
and as I said, and as I believe, that is proper and correct, and that is where it should be. I think if we're talking about looking at the future, we need housing. Is there a housing use that's possible? I don't know the layout, I haven't been there, I don't know what's possible. But I would not like to see R1 reduced in the city at all. And we don't know that GAS is gonna be here, it's like you're here now.
this is great. Back to the origin story of the building.
Yeah,
Because
exactly,
they
that's
didn't
what I'm
know,
thinking.
they did not know.
And
is
we
this
still
gonna work or
don't.
not?
I mean, that's the thing.
And what was your backup plan when you built the building? You'd just cut it into 4 or 6 condominiums.
Condominiums.
Yeah,
Yeah,
housing.
right,
And
which makes sense.
so to go along that line of thinking,
Mhm.
we've recently, in the past few years, said that we're interested in multifamily housing
Mhm.
in the highway mixed use district. As a matter of fact, it's a permitted principal use, you don't even need special permission for it. It's easier to do in this district than it is in the R1 district. So if you're thinking the backup plan for that building is housing, that's a case for making it highway mixed use zoning, not R1. But if the issue is it compatible to have schools in and amongst the other things going on in the highway mixed use district, that's a different story. Because it's not just about this lot, it's would you want somebody to open a school in Schroeder Electric's building down the corner? You want somebody to open a school next to the equipment yard down the highway, or next to the Super 8, or whatever else is in the highway mixed use zone right now. Does it make sense for a school to be somewhere else in that zone? I think is the trickier question. And then I look at the R1 district, which yes, it does talk about families, but it seems like a total non sequitur to me to go from residential to schools.
Well, no,
Right,
but
but
the
that was my
highway mixed
question as
use,
well.
I mean,
How do they?
but that was the point of the highway mixed use, is to be a transition point, and it has to transition to something.
Yeah,
It can't be a perpetual gradient, right? It's going to be something. So yes, it came to R1, which I think is feasible.
Well, when talking about we can't predict the future, one of the questions that I had written down in reading through this was, if this wasn't to go through, is there a backup plan for the school, or is this sort of, we're gonna cross that bridge depending on what the answer to this hearing is right now? Is there a potentially going to condos, and then if that happens or enrollment starts to go up again, do you know what I'm saying?
We hope the enrollment goes up.
Right, obviously we all do.
And this is a bridge, our board is, with reduced population in the school, they can't carry the mortgage.
Right.
And so, in Minnesota, charter schools don't own their buildings, so that's why the Great Expectations Foundation owns the building, the school leases space from the foundation. Well, with their reduced needs, they're compensated by the state per pupil, if they have adequate space, so they have an upper, if they get beyond the formula, then they're spending way more money than they need to, and they can't spend, they have spending money on space that they should be spending on the students. So, the foundation actually reduced their annual lease by $40,000 for next year. So the board decided to try to cover that loss in revenue, if we could lease some space that's not occupied by the school now, and for some reason, the demographics went from, we had a waiting list and we're climbing, to all of a sudden people stopped having babies. COVID really took a bite out of births. And of course, in a school, you can look ahead 5 years, because or 6 years, you've got birth rates today. I mean, you know how many kids are born. You can maybe add a few for inflow. But that's what's available for starting school in 5 or 6 years. So, we know that we got 5 or 6 years at least of leasing that we need to cover. And we also have a whole upstairs that we can build out. So we have the premier office space availability in this community. We got tons of space, and we need renters. And I was looking at advertising our space on a commercial site, and I was going through the whole checklist, and it said, how is this zoned? I called up Mike or Alyssa and said, what's our zoning there? Mm-hmm. So, as Mike was presenting that to me, we could have come in and said, okay, can we put offices in R1? Well, that's gonna open up a way bigger discussion than what we're having here. So, we kind of looked at, okay, let's go highway mixed use. It covers all the bases of the housing. The only thing that's missing is the education piece. So that's the genesis of why we came here, and this is good discussion, and thank you. It's predecessor to the comments that are coming, but financially, we really got to do something to cut this nut, covering the mortgage, basically. So
Howard, I don't know if it's appropriate here or not. I'll ask a question and you can tell me later. Funding for the foundation, I'm assuming grants, individual donations, and fundraising?
yeah, basically the two basic ways we're paying our mortgage now is the lease on the school, which we just cut by $40,000, and then we have a $50,000 or $55,000 annual pledge. We've got people that have pledged enough annually for 5 years to cover $50,000, which covers the rest of our debt. Plus, we have some unsecured notes out there. They're just floating there because we have no way to pay them. So we've got some community members that have some money parked with us that paid off the school. But, really if we can lease some space, that's probably our only avenue. and I had a good lead, but, the guy wanted to set up a cannabis operation, and he found out we was in a school. It wasn't near a school, it was in a school. He said, oh, okay, I can't talk to you.
That would explode their heads, I think.
Might raise some, concern.
Yeah,
It'd be hard to get the permit.
hard to get the permit, yeah, no.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we're trying to, before we, put people in there, lease the space and then come back and ask your forgiveness of, gee, we forgot about the zoning. It just seemed to make sense to add it to the highway mixed use, and I don't disagree with you, Michael, but there's a long list of stuff in there. I guess our ask is to add schools and nurseries, into that mix. And if you add businesses to R1, there's a way bigger crowd of people that are gonna move into R1 with businesses than if you have schools in highway mixed use of schools coming to move into that zone. I mean, there's not that many of us out there, so, we just ask for your help on this, I guess.
I see it's similar to kind of what has transpired in the business park, where residential uses have been allowed within a business industrial area that was based on the concerns of people wanting to put a business up there, but also wanted to have a residence in relationship to those, and it's been seeming to be very successful. That people wanted to build their homes in the midst of a business park, industrial, commercial setting.
But that's a financial equation too. I mean, they couldn't afford a house and a business, but they can afford a home business, so,
Right.
yeah.
And it really almost goes back to the original kind of Gunflint Trail, the old Gunflint Trail area, where it's, a neighborhood, commercial, residential, I can't remember the.
Yeah, it's exactly what Kelly, you were talking about, which is let's create a district that describes what's here rather than think about what we want it to be.
Right.
Now, as crazy as that is, I'm not a huge fan of that strategy. It's an option for you here too, rather than try to solve this problem in a way that works universally. You can just legislate a solution that only works for this spot by saying the lease of office space in an existing school. And, it's not very satisfying, but it doesn't create any other problems.
Is that variance process or conditional use, or how does that?
I mean, you
We
don't,
would have to rewrite.
it doesn't exist right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you can't do it as a variance, variances can't be used for uses. So you can't, there's no special permission right now that exists for them to just say, hey, can we do this? We have to actually create a way for them to ask this question.
And really, the mixed use district does give you that opportunity, because already the school exists within the mix of uses, which are business and residential uses along this Gunflint corridor. So whether it's in the R1 district or in the mixed use district, doesn't change, anything that's happening in this neighborhood at all, other than maybe you would allow offices in the school property particularly. It doesn't change anything for any of the other properties, because offices are already allowed on their properties. So, would another school want to be built in the mixed use district? I don't know if there's a lot more capacity for more schools in the community, but I think the one thing I was trying to get at earlier with the definition of schools is it doesn't take on the type of schools like North House or the Art Colony or other schools that are not your traditional institutions that we all think of. And they're located in the residential district and in the commercial district. So you have those kind of activities. Higher ed is in the residential district. The Art Colony has in the residential district and in the commercial district. So the whole issue of schools, there could be another school built in the mixed use district, but maybe it's not the traditional school that we're thinking about. It's something else that we haven't thought about that could potentially do what's already been done in the community. So,
I'm interested in exploring it and talking about it. I don't know what my vote would be when we came to it, that, you know, I wanna hear more. My brain's still going to, all right, 5 years from now, we don't have a population continuing to grow with young people. You don't have enough, and Great Expectations says we can't do this anymore. Now the foundation has a building that has to be sold. Now what? Now how does that look? How does it become property? Who would wanna buy that property? What would they do with it? Cause I can't imagine the foundation wants to get into providing housing and support, you know.
well,
In theory, right,
So,
just imagine.
to start with, I don't want to promote the thought that the school is failing, it's not.
No.
No, and I'm not saying
So,
that,
and it's a
Howard, but
population
I'm
issue.
trying to think
So-
in the future.
Yeah,
It
no,
could
no,
also explode and you say, hey, we're going next door and
Yeah.
trying to buy that property and wanna bring it in,
Well,
cause we need to
we
expand.
have plenty of, but we can really expand.
Yeah,
I mean, so as the population goes up, we'll just end the lease with whoever we have. You know, if it's in a business, so, okay,
Sure.
sorry, things have changed, find a new place next year. What else was I gonna say? We have a lot of room to expand. I mean, the building is designed for 150 students. The way it is, we're at about 100 right now. So, and then we have a hole upstairs. I lost the argument that we should keep it affordable, and said, well, we're building it, let's build it bigger. So we got a hole upstairs that's unfinished, but could be finished. So there's another 4,000 square feet there. So that we could add to the school easily, or add to the business, but, and say it all went away, kids disappeared. I mean, it would make good condos, it would make good facility like that. Could you put senior living in there? I don't know, but I mean, it also,
right,
like Tim said, really points to highway mixed use, because all those are contemplated in that zone.
and that's what I wanna think about, not that
Yeah.
I'm saying you're going away, I hope that's not the
But
case.
if we did,
But if
highway
we
mixed
did-
use would be the better zone, because we could be either offices or, higher density housing.
How, yeah. My thought is trying to think in the future, how would that affect and how do people then, what would it look like for uses then?
Yeah.
What would we look at putting in there?
And tonight isn't the night for
Right.
being decisive about
No,
that, but
that's-
it is for picking the question that we wanna ask. And this is the one that's being proposed. Is this the one that we wanna get input on? Is this the one that we wanna do the process and go through and make a decision about? Or is there something, is there another creative way to solve this problem that makes sense to you?
So you're saying bring it back?
Yeah, cause the real process is still, this,
Yeah.
it takes an ordinance to be passed by the city council, 2 hearings,
Yeah.
we're ways off from being done, we're just,
Yeah.
we wanna make sure that once we've started down, it's the direction you wanted us to go. And it doesn't make sense to start with the map question before we fix this problem. So, there's a lot of assumptions baked into this idea that we're gonna change the language and then change the map and it's all gonna work out. We just wanna make sure all those are the ones you want.
I guess for my money, I'd like to change the definition first, and then apply for a zone change to the other use.
That seems to make the most sense.
Yeah, bring that forward and
Yeah.
vote on that and then.
Okay,
To me, they're the same question,
same question, yeah.
right?
Well-
And we can have a hearing on both questions at the same time.
Sure.
Yeah, it's just,
So we don't need to stretch it out over 2 more months. Like, I
Right.
think we can, if this is the path you want the public to weigh in on, we'll come back, we'll have the language change, the map change. One of the things about this is, the language change, there's not gonna be a list of people we have to send a notice to, because there isn't anybody, right?
Yeah.
The map change there is, like, we're gonna be sending a notice to people within 350 feet of there, inviting them to that public hearing. So,
I think for the R1 conversation, like, I'm not gonna get too hung up on the details of whether or not it's for, like you were talking about, families and for kids, and like, we understand we don't wanna lose R1, right? But this is, this to me is non-conforming, this isn't what R1, the way that I look at that single-family home, this isn't never gonna be a single-family home, right, ever. So, I think highway mixed use is exactly what this property looks like. I mean, that's what we, I mean, if it's GES, the foundation, if it's the school, if it's condos, if it's whatever, that's exactly why we created that zone for multifamily, whatever. So, I mean, I support it, I think it's.
I would tend to agree with that as well. I mean, that's the first thing I thought when I read through this was that seems to make the most sense when you read through it and think about short-term and long-term. It just seems to make more sense to do it that way than
Yeah.
have this sort of
I think the
anomaly.
danger, the things that the slippery slope of highway mixed use is, hey, do we wanna see a bunch of short-term rentals, which that's everybody's fear, right? So if the
That's
school
not
doesn't
in there.
work out, we run a bunch of VRBOs, right?
I don't think
the
that's in
fear,
the-
right?
I didn't read it for a while, but I don't think that's in the list, is what you can do.
Oh, it for
Sure.
sure
Oh,
is.
is it? Oh,
Yeah.
okay, yeah.
And so like that's the nuts and bolts of
Yeah.
like, that's the slippery slope, the fear of that zone. Encroaching into R1,
Yeah, I got it, yeah.
so.
And I guess my response to that would probably be that because the building already exists, it's not just a lot. It's not, we're not asking that question about a piece of land without anything on it, that building is already there. It's a new building, it's a substantial building, that's not necessarily something that somebody's gonna come in and knock down a good existing building and then put up 4 tiny homes to rent them short term. If it was just a lot, I think that's a valid,
Right.
that would probably happen.
People
Easier
spend a lot of money
question.
to rehab,
Yeah,
properties to make
Right.
them short-term rentals,
Yeah.
right? Like
We've got
that's-
zones where people have to come in and get a conditional use permit, and the question that's before you is take an existing residence and turn it into a vacation rental. That's a really hard question. This is not an existing residence. Maybe it's a good thing to create an outlet for vacation rentals that doesn't require the use of the existing housing. Maybe that helps the market.
Then could we move them just to the HMU and not R1 or MU? There's my goal. I've never been shy.
You like the commercial residential mixed use district, is that what you're suggesting? What?
For a VRBO,
Oh, for VRBO,
yeah.
different question,
Different
gotcha.
question, different duck for a
Yeah.
different day.
You can bring that to the agenda anytime you're ready.
But to be clear, in the R1, you can have apartment buildings, and we made it so you can have row houses and all that, so it's not like none of those large structures can exist in the R1, they do, or they're permitted, or conditional use, but still they are permitted use. So, clear.
So there's a little language in the highway mixed use zone that, beyond the permitted principal uses, we have permitted accessory uses in zones. And so it says accessory uses customary to permitted uses, it's just that simple, right? Pretty broad in highway mixed use. We would not want that broad language in our residential zone because it would be widely abused. Because we don't allow schools in highway mixed use, we can't access that for this question. But we could potentially look at something like that, back to try to come up with a specific answer that doesn't create other problems. We could add to the R1 accessory uses that are customary to schools, daycares, such and such, not residences, but those as its own separate question. And then I think that you can make a case that rental of commercial space, or maybe they could try to make that case. It's a backup plan here if this isn't
So
the
it
way to
stays in the
go.
R1, but we change what we mean, or what we're saying when you're saying accessory uses.
In the R1, our permitted accessory uses are accessory buildings and accessory dwelling units. Clearly not
Right.
what they're talking about. And so you'd have to add another item that says accessory uses in, I don't know how to say it yet, but, specific to items 4 and 5, which are the public schools and churches. And, it's another idea that if this one's too complicated and creates too many unintended consequences, that there are ways for us to come up with something that's very specific to this that don't do that. It gets a little into what Kelly was talking about, which feels awkward and I don't like a lot, but maybe that's an alternative to consider.
So it's still R1, but we're just making it so that there's some conditional, what would be conditional?
Well, basically, if you think this is an accessory use that's customary for,
I think it opens up a lot of other stuff.
I was gonna say, I don't think I like that. I would rather explore moving forward with the HMU. I don't like putting something like this into R1. I think that it leaves way too many.
well, yeah. Well, that's 3 head nods to at least explore the
If
what's
you're
in
trying
front
to
of us.
preserve R1 for what it is, right, like you
Yeah.
wouldn't wanna go and meddle with it.
Yeah,
Oh, when I discussed this with Mike, a few weeks ago, I mean, that was exactly where we came down, it's like, whoa, this, try to fit an office, try to structure that really opens up the can of worms of how that could be misused down the road, so. But here again,
Yeah.
you guys are
Good.
decision
It's
makers.
good conversation.
I think at this point, the plan is to have a public hearing at your next meeting. We're gonna talk about specific language change that's very similar to what they're proposing, adding those uses to highway mixed use. And also a zoning map amendment that takes this property and potentially a couple of the neighboring properties and switches them to highway mixed use. So in the meantime, I'll reach out to the Groves about their property, also Arrowhead Electric about their garage on the corner, which is also R1 right now. And see if they're interested in participating in that zoning map amendment too. They'll have to think about it, maybe they are, maybe they aren't, but as long as
to
we're
do
doing
that,
this.
can we have a zoning map up then for people to see that?
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
think it's really helpful.
Okay,
And again, it's just to explore it, it's not to definitely make the change, but to go down that road and see where it takes us.
Well, at your next meeting, you're gonna be asked to make a decision about it.
Yeah.
So to recommend yes or no, and then it'll go to the council where they'll have to consider an ordinance that takes 2 meetings to pass. And so, it won't be done, but you're gonna be asked to make your recommendation at your next meeting.
I think our intent at this meeting was to hear, let you guys understand what it is that we're trying to do and kind of, as I said, the dilemma that we're in. The R1 district doesn't quite work and the mixed use district isn't quite adequate, so we better need some kind of
And
action.
I appreciate it, and I like that we can look at it and kind of plan for the future. Again, I'm so tired in so many aspects, whether it's anywhere that I've been a part of. Everything is going back and asking for forgiveness, or here, we're just gonna do it for what it is now, and we don't ever look forward. And I'm tired of being reactive, I'd rather be proactive. And I think this gives us that chance to really, it's only basically 30 more days that we have to think about it and gather information and do things. But I think that it gives us that opportunity to put some time into this and go, what makes sense for that corridor? When the Gunflint got rerouted, the purpose was for the trucks that were coming down the hill from a large industrial business to have a safe spot and keep the public safe. And what happened? Homes got built there and the people don't like the trucks. It was specifically built for that intention. So I think we need to go back and make sure that we're doing the right things, looking to the future, as much as we can.
thanks, Kelly, that's great. All right, I feel like we're ready.
Great meeting.
Yeah,
Yes,
appreciate your
thank
time
you.
and comments,
Thank you.
thoughts, yeah. Great,
We are adjourned.
all right.
Done.